All right, y'all, we back with another video. So today we are going to be continuing with the run-on of our Battle Guide series. So this is going to be Battle Guide Series 4, buffs, debuffs, and stacking. Now, one of the most important mechanics in the game is how to effectively utilize your support characters to increase the damage of your DPS. So in this game, nuking is one of the, I guess, biggest forms and most strongest and reliable option to clear content. So surprisingly, there is still a lot of players who are still doing it wrong or not doing it optimally and can be doing it a lot better than they are previously. So in this video, we're going to be going over all the buffs, debuffs, and stacking, be it for new players who have no idea how buffs works or veterans who are missing out on a lot of, damage, right? Because they don't know how it functions. First, we must differentiate between different damage buffs and debuff types. What a lot of players don't know is that it's better to use lots of different buffs and debuffs than using the same exact type of buff or debuff. There's a bunch of math behind it, but let's think of it as putting on armor, right? What's better, having 2 helmets or having a helmet and a breastplate? Of course, it's the helmet and the breastplate. What the fuck are you going to do with 2 helmets? You're going to put 2 fucking helmets on it. It's not going to be just as efficient, right? So we're going to take SR Yaga and SSR Momo as an example. So let's go to them real quick. All right, so we're here on SR Yaga, right? So we're going to go to a skill 2 because the skill 2 is obviously the skill that you're going to be using to provide a buff that increases physical and curse technique damage, right? So keep this in mind. This is going to be very important. Physical and curse technique increase, okay? So now we're here on Momo, and Momo skill 2 is going to be increased damage dealt, right? So that's going to be very different compared to increasing your curse and your physical technique. And since these two are different buffs, your damage is going to be insanely high because of how they apply onto each other, right? So it's better to obviously not have 2 of the same types of buffs, but more so different types of buffers, right? So one that can increase damage dealt and then another that can increase your physical and curse technique is obviously going to give you higher damage numbers than having 2 characters that increase your physical and curse technique or having 2 characters that increase your damage dealt. So if you understand it and you keep it in mind while building your team, your nuking numbers will be, you'll basically see them drastically higher than normal. So basically improvements, and you're already better than a lot of veteran players. Trust me, there's still a lot of veteran players that still don't know what they're doing. It gets more complicated also when we start adding damage support recollections into the mix, but for now you'll be just set. Knowing the variety in buffs and debuffs is better than having the same type, right? So let's move on to the next section, which is going to be stacking. So this is going to be the most confusing part about buffs and debuffs, because what does stacking buffs and debuffs even mean? If something stacks, it means you can apply it more than once, and each time adds to the effect. For example, again, right? So stacking basically means putting on a helmet and then putting on another helmet. Your defense is twice as strong now, but there's a limit to stacking. You can't infinitely stack a buff as they have turn restrictions. So we're going to take a look at SR Yaga's skill 2 again. The buff only lasts for 4 turns. You can only have 4 stacks of it at once. So once you try to put on a 5th buff, the very first buff you applied will already expire, so you will only be at the limit of 4 stacks maximum, right? What's very important to know is when the buff expires, some people think that if you buff with Momo on turn 1, your buff will last for the next 2 turns, basically until turn 3, right? But it will actually only last until the next turn. That's because buffs and debuffs already start on the same turn as you use it. Meaning, if I were using the Yaga buff this turn, right? Let's say turn 1, and I use that buff, that turn that I use that buff is going to still count. Meaning, when I go into the next following turn, I actually only have 3 turns of that buff active left, right? Not 4. So just keep that in mind, because that's important to know, and people can improperly time their buffs when doing damage, right? So next up, we are going to be talking about examples of not optimal and optimal buffs, right? So let's go into a team to kind of give you a better perspective. All right, so we're here at our team. So here we have the standard team with 3 buffers, debuffers, basically either of the 2, right? And a DPS character, obviously being Gojo as our character. At first glance, it looks good. And don't get me wrong, this Gojo will still hit very high, but you can actually make an adjustment which will make Gojo's damage way higher. So as you can see, we have Domain Megami, who applies a damage increase debuff to the enemies. And then we have SR Yaga, who buffs curse technique damage and, physical damage. Obviously, in this case, we're using Gojo, so we only care about the curse technique damage. However, Blue Gojo with SSR Momo isn't as good of a match as you think it would be. And that's because Momo applies a damage increase buff for all allies, but Blue Gojo also applies a damage increase buff with his skill 2 on himself. So he already has this self buff that's already doing the kind of same thing that Momo would be giving him. So it's not going to be as efficient. This would end up being the same type of buff, making it more ineffective. Now, your Gojo right now, he basically, this is going to be another example. Your Gojo basically, he has a helmet on from Domain Megami, he has a breastplate on from Yaga, but then he has 2 pairs of boots from Momo and himself. No fucking pants, all right? No fucking pants at all. So you're going to want to change that up. So if we replace SSR Momo with, let's say, JJK Zero Geto or Blue Inumaki, who apply another type of debuff that the team doesn't have yet, your damage will be significantly higher. Now our guy's got some pants on, you know what I'm saying? So you have a wide range of different types of buffs and debuffs, increasing his overall damage output. Anyways, that's basically going to be the explanation of the Battle Guide Series 4. The buffs, debuffs, and stacking kind of explained well, so that way you can kind of understand how some of the buffs and debuffs kind of function with each other and how to improve your overall damage output. So hopefully this explained everything well. And if you have any other questions, you could just ask in the comments. One other thing, make sure to check out the other guides. I do have 3 other guides on the channel explaining, special gauge, everything, buffing, all sorts of things, right? Team building, all of it. So you can get a proper understanding on how to properly play the game. Some people may think that they know what they're doing, but because they've already been playing the game for some time, but there's still some things that you don't know, especially like, for example, the special gauge video is super important that a lot of people don't know, and how much special gauge you get with each action, whether it may be breaking the enemy or, just hitting the enemy or using a buff rather than a normal skill. Obviously using your combo ults. There's a lot of those numbers that can help you kind of formulate your turns ahead in advance. So that way, when you're going to get your ult and how much damage you're going to be able to do before, you actually get to that turn. This helps you plan in the future better, so that way you are less likely to lose in, content. But anyways, we've already talked enough about the Battle Guide series. Again, like I said, if you have any questions, ask in the comments. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.